In 1993, the one man who could never get lost in the forest vanished there forever. For 30 years, his case went cold. But what if the single clue everyone ignored, a priceless jewel from another continent, was the key to his murder? The truth has been waiting. Stay with me as we uncover it. Some mysteries never let go. They sink their claws deep into the memory of a place and refuse to release their grip, becoming part of the soil, the water, the very air people breathe. For the small communities huddled in the shadow of Whispering Giants National Park, the story of Ranger Elias Thorne was exactly that. A piece of folklore, a cautionary tale whispered to children who wandered too close to the tree line. He was the man who knew the forest better than his own home, the man who could read a broken twig like a line of text, whose presence was as steady and enduring as the ancient cedars he protected. And on a crisp autumn afternoon in 1993, with the sky a brilliant, cloudless blue, he walked into the heart of that forest for a routine patrol and was swallowed whole. No scream, no sign of struggle, no sound, just gone. For 30 years, his name became a ghost. The case file, thick with fruitless search grids and witness statements filled with disbelief, gathered dust in the county archives. It became a monument to the forest's power to keep its secrets, a stark reminder that even the most experienced among us can be erased by the indifferent power of nature. The official story was a tragic accident. A seasoned ranger finally lost to the unforgiving wilderness he loved. It was a neat, clean narrative. It was also a lie. Buried deep within that file, a single baffling detail was filed away and forgotten. It was an anomaly, a piece of evidence so out of place, so bizarre, it was deemed irrelevant by investigators overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the empty forest. It was a pin, found glinting in the damp pine needles near his abandoned patrol truck. Not a button from his uniform or a badge, but a piece of exquisite handcrafted jewelry. It was an enamel butterfly of impossible detail and iridescent color, a creature of vibrant tropical beauty found in the cold, damp shadows of the Pacific Northwest. An impossible artifact in an impossible place. For 3 decades, that pin sat in the dark of an evidence locker, its strange, silent story untold. It was a secret kept not by the forest, but by the very system sworn to uncover them. Until a young archivist, tasked with the mundane job of clearing out the county's coldest cases, shined a light on that forgotten jewel. And in doing so, she would prove that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of finding the light. She would learn that some monsters don't live in the woods. They live in mansions, protected by money and silence. Before we begin this journey into the shadows, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Your presence here is a testament to the fact that no one is truly forgotten as long as someone is willing to listen to their story. Hit subscribe to join us as we unravel the mystery of the butterfly pin, and help us make sure no name stays buried. To understand the silence he left behind, you must first understand the man. Elias Thorne was not built for the noise of the modern world. He was quiet, not shy, but observant. The kind of man who would watch a storm roll in for an hour without blinking, just to see how the clouds folded into themselves. He moved with a patience that seemed to belong to a different era, a time before deadlines and digital distractions. At 42, his face was a map of his life in the open air, etched by sun and wind, each line a story of a blizzard survived or a summer drought endured. His hands, calloused and capable, could mend a fence, splint a broken branch, or hold his daughter's hand with equal gentleness. Whispering Giants National Park wasn't just his job, it was his sanctuary. For Elias, it was a sprawling, living cathedral of Douglas fir and ancient cedar, a place he knew with an intimacy that bordered on the spiritual. He knew the hidden groves where the ghost orchids bloomed for only a single week in the high alpine meadows, their white petals like apparitions in the gloom. He could tell the mood of the forest by the sound of the wind through its branches, a mournful sigh before rain, a sharp whisper in the dry heat of August. His life was one of routine and quiet purpose, a rhythm set by the rising and setting of the sun. Each day began before dawn with a thermos of black coffee and a silent communion on his porch, watching the first light spill over the jagged peaks of the Cascade Range. But of all his duties, the one he cherished most was being a father. His daughter, Clara, was 7 years old in the autumn of 1993, a bright, inquisitive child with her father's watchful, curious eyes. Their bond was forged not in a house, but on the park's gentler trails. He taught her how to identify the tracks of a black bear, the delicate prints of a deer, and the difference between a raven's deep, resonant call and a crow's ragged caw. These were not just lessons in nature. They were lessons in seeing the world as he saw it, as a place of intricate, interconnected wonder. October 12, 1993, began like any other day in that peaceful world. The air was crisp, carrying the sharp, clean scent of pine and damp earth. He kissed a sleepy Clara goodbye, her small hand clutching a stuffed bear, and promised to be home in time to read her a story. His patrol assignment was the Northern Boundary Trail, a remote and seldom traveled section of the park, a place where the curated wilderness met the untamed. His last radio call came at 3:47 p.m. It was a routine check-in, the kind he'd made thousands of times before. The dispatcher's log noted his voice was calm, steady, betraying no hint of alarm. He reported his position at mile marker 14 on the old service road. And then there was only static. The silence that began in that moment would stretch for 30 years. It would become the most haunting sound the park had ever known. When Elias Thorne missed his 6 p.m. radio check-in, the initial concern at the ranger station was a low hum, not a scream. He was, after all, Elias, the most capable, experienced ranger on staff. Delays were common. A downed tree, a washed-out creek bed, a sudden squall rolling off the peaks. Any number of routine wilderness problems could put a man behind schedule. But as the sun bled out behind the mountains, staining the sky in hues of orange and violet, the forest turned a deep, impenetrable black. And the low hum of concern began to sharpen into a knot of dread. By 9 p.m., with the radio still silent, a preliminary search was launched. His patrol truck was found just past midnight, parked neatly on the gravel shoulder of the service road. The scene was eerily normal. The keys were still in the ignition. His half-full thermos of coffee sat on the passenger seat, still warm to the touch. There was no sign of a crash, no shattered glass, no trace of a struggle. It was as if he had simply stopped the engine, stepped out of the vehicle, and been erased from the world. The next morning, one of the largest search and rescue operations in the state's history was mobilized. For 2 agonizing weeks, a small army of humanity pushed back against the wilderness. Hundreds of volunteers, state police, and his own uniformed colleagues combed a 50-square-mile grid of unforgiving terrain. Helicopters with infrared cameras droned overhead, their rotor blades beating a futile rhythm against the profound silence below. Cadaver dogs, with their uncanny ability to find the lost, were brought in. But they lost his scent just a few yards from the truck, whining in confused, frustrated circles before giving up. The forest wasn't cooperating. It was hiding him. They found nothing. Not a footprint, not a broken branch, not a single thread from his uniform. The forest, the place he had loved and protected, had swallowed him without a trace. The search teams were looking for a man, but the only anomaly they found was discovered by a rookie deputy on the third day. About 20 feet from the truck, half buried beneath a carpet of damp pine needles, something glinted in the weak morning light. It was the butterfly pin. It was meticulously crafted, the enamel work so fine it looked like real iridescent insect wings. It was photographed, bagged, and labeled as unidentified jewelry. In the frantic, desperate context of a search for a missing ranger, the pin made no sense. It was a beautiful, delicate object in a raw, brutal landscape. So it was dismissed. It was logged as litter, a lost item from some unknown hiker dropped months or even years before. Its appearance at that specific time and place was deemed a strange but meaningless coincidence. With no other leads, the search was scaled back and then officially called off. Elias Thorne was declared presumed dead, a victim of the wilderness. The case file was closed, and the beautiful, exotic butterfly was dropped into the darkness of Evidence Locker 1138, where it would wait for 3 decades to tell its story. For a child, a ghost is not a memory, it is a presence. After her father disappeared, Clara Thorne's world was not broken, but reshaped by the gaping hole his absence left behind. Their small house at the edge of the park, once a place of warmth and the smell of wood smoke, became a shrine of quiet hope and painful memory. Her father's heavy hiking boots remained by the door, as if waiting for him to step back into them. His favorite worn flannel shirt, smelling faintly of pine and earth, stayed draped over the back of his chair. These were not just objects, they were anchors, tangible pieces of a man who had become a phantom. For years, Clara would wake in the dead of night, her heart pounding, certain she could hear his steady, familiar footsteps on the wooden porch. She would hold her breath, listening to the silence, waiting for a sound that never came. The community wrapped its arms around Clara and her mother, a comforting but suffocating embrace. Their sympathy, delivered in casseroles and sad, knowing glances, was a constant reminder of the hole that had been torn in their lives. The not knowing was a special kind of torture, an endless question without an answer. But the official explanation that her father, the expert, the man who spoke the language of the forest, had simply gotten lost, never felt right to Clara. Even as a child, she knew it was a story that didn't fit the man. Her father didn't get lost. The forest was his partner, not his enemy. He navigated by the angle of the sun and the patterns of moss on the trees. As she grew from a child into a young woman, that quiet, instinctual certainty hardened into a persistent, gnawing question that became the central axis of her life. She went away to college, studied botany, and tried to build a life for herself, but the ghost of her father was always there, a shadow at the edge of her vision. The park, the wilderness that was once her playground and classroom, became a source of deep and painful conflict. It was his tomb, the vast green monument to his disappearance. But it was also the last place he had been truly alive. She couldn't stay away, but every hike, Every rustle of leaves in the wind was a fresh wound. For 30 years, she lived in the shadow of that unanswered question. She carried the weight of it in her every step. She held on to hope when no one else did, refusing to let silence be the end of her father's story. All the while, she never knew that the key to the entire mystery, the one thing that could give her father's ghost a voice and finally break the suffocating silence, was lying just 60 miles away in a climate-controlled room, catalogued, forgotten, and waiting in the dark. Time has a way of turning even the deepest tragedies into administrative tasks. In the spring of 2023, the Counds County Sheriff's Department, facing a new round of budget cuts, mandated a full inventory of its long-term evidence storage. It was a place where the county's ghosts resided, a vast, climate-controlled warehouse filled with the sealed boxes of cold cases and forgotten crimes. The task, considered a thankless chore by seasoned deputies, fell to a handful of unpaid college interns. Among them was Maya Singh, a bright, meticulous history major with a quiet intensity. Her job was monotonous. Open, sealed cardboard boxes, cross-reference their content with decades-old handwritten evidence logs, and flag items for potential disposal or auction. Most boxes contained the grim, mundane artifacts of human tragedy. Rusted knives sealed in plastic, faded photographs of smiling faces, vacuum-sealed bags of clothing. But one afternoon, while logging the contents from the Elias Thorne case, she found box 1138. The tape was yellowed and brittle with age. Inside, among the sterile evidence bags containing soil samples and a plaster cast of a tire track, she found a small, black, velvet-lined jeweler's box. It seemed impossibly out of place. With a sense of reverence, she opened it. Even under the harsh, humming fluorescent lights of the warehouse, the butterfly pin seemed to hold its own light. It seemed to glow. Maya knew nothing of lepidopterology, the study of butterflies, but she had a keen eye for art. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. The colors were vibrant, almost liquid, and the detail was so fine she could see the delicate veins in the insect's wings. It was more than a pin. It was a sculpture. She checked the evidence log. The entry, scrawled in faded blue ink, described it with bureaucratic indifference. Item 7. Butterfly pin. The simple description felt like an insult to its obvious and profound beauty. A flicker of something, curiosity, intuition, the historian's instinct to look closer, took hold. Driven by a feeling that went far beyond the duties of her internship, she took a high-resolution photo of the pin with her phone. That night, breaking protocol, she posted the image to an online forum she frequented. It was a niche community, a quiet corner of the internet dedicated to identifying antique and artisan jewelry. She wrote a simple, unassuming caption. Found this while archiving old county property. Any idea what it is or who might have made it? The detail is incredible. She closed her laptop and went to sleep, completely unaware that she had just done something the original investigators had failed to do. She had shown the butterfly to the world. She had sent a signal flare into the digital darkness, a flare that would finally reignite a 30-year-old mystery and bring its terrible truth screaming into the light. The internet works in strange ways. The answer to Maya's post did not come from a jeweler in London or an antique dealer in Paris. It came 3 days later from a user named Lepidoptera. He was a man named Dr. Alastair Finch, a semi-retired professor of entomology from the University of British Columbia. His response was not about jewelry. It was about biology. and it was electric with the kind of fierce academic excitement that can only come from a lifetime of passionate study. He wrote, "This is not just a pin. This is a breathtakingly accurate life-size replica of a female Ornithoptera alexandra, the Queen Alexandra's birdwing. It is, by a significant margin, the largest butterfly species in the world. It is also one of the rarest. It is critically endangered, and its only known habitat is a tiny, remote corner of the Oro province in Papua New Guinea." Dr. Finch went on to explain, his words tumbling out with professorial urgency, that possessing even a taxidermied specimen of this creature was illegal under the CITES Treaty, an international agreement to protect endangered wildlife. The level of detail on the pin, he argued, the near photographic accuracy of the wing patterns and coloration suggested it was made by one of only 2 or 3 master artisans in the entire world who specialize in such hyper-realistic enamel work. These artists, he explained, were notoriously secretive. They worked almost exclusively on private commission for a very small, very wealthy, and fanatically obsessed circle of private collectors. Individuals who saw the rarest artifacts of the natural world not as creatures to be preserved, but as treasures to be possessed. He concluded his post with a question that took a 30-year-old coincidence and turned it into a clue. A question that changed everything. "This pin," he wrote, "would be worth a fortune to the right person. To find it simply discarded in the woods of North America is unthinkable, impossible even. Can you please provide the context of where this was found? Because this is far, far more than a piece of jewelry." The quiet little forum thread exploded. Suddenly, the pin was no longer just a beautiful object. It was a legendary creature from the other side of the world, tangled up in a web of international law and the secretive passions of the ultra-rich. The story of the pin, now linked to the Queen of Papua New Guinea, was picked up by a local news blogger. The article was small, a quirky human interest piece buried on a slow news day. But it was read by the one person it needed to reach. A man for whom a 30-year-old mystery was not a piece of history, but an itch he could never quite scratch. Miles Corbin was a man who couldn't let go of a puzzle. A decorated homicide detective from Seattle, he had retired to Cascade County seeking peace and quiet, but quickly found that a life without unanswered questions was intolerably boring. To stave off the restlessness, he filled his days volunteering for the sheriff's department, organizing and reviewing cold case files. A grim, thankless task most deputies considered a form of purgatory. For Corbin, it was a sanctuary. When he read the local blogger's article about the mysterious butterfly pin, a familiar spark, long dormant, ignited in the back of his mind. He remembered the Elias Thorne case. It was a local legend, a tragedy that had always felt incomplete, like a story with its final page torn out. He drove to the station that afternoon and pulled the thick, dusty file. He read through the initial reports, the meticulous but fruitless search grids, the interviews filled with the raw shock of grief and confusion. And he read the sterile, dismissive entry for Item 7. The pin, logged and forgotten. But now, armed with Dr. Finch's startling information, the pin was anything but irrelevant. It was a lead. A 30-year-old lead, ice cold to the touch, but a lead nonetheless. This wasn't litter. This was a message. Corbin contacted Dr. Finch, who eagerly provided the names of the 3 artisans in the world capable of such work. The list was short. One was deceased. One lived in Belgium and hadn't taken a commission in years. And the third, a reclusive Japanese master named Kenji Tanaka, was rumored to work exclusively for a single, notoriously private American client. The client's name was Julian Croft. The name rang a distant, dissonant bell for Corbin. He spent the next 2 days buried in the county's digital archives, digging into old property records, a methodical process that felt like dusting for fingerprints on a ghost. And then he found it. Julian Croft was a reclusive, almost mythical tech billionaire who, in the late 1980s, had purchased thousands of acres of private, undeveloped land. Land that bordered the far northern edge of Whispering Giants National Park. The same remote, seldom-traveled area that Ranger Elias Thorne had been assigned to patrol on the day he vanished. Suddenly, the pin was no longer a random object found in the dirt. It was a connection. An impossible, terrifying connection between a reclusive billionaire, a rare butterfly from the other side of the planet, and a park ranger who disappeared without a sound. It was a thread, and Miles Corbin, a man who lived to unravel such things, was determined to pull it, no matter what monster was waiting at the other end. Julian Croft was a ghost in the world of the ultra-wealthy. He gave no interviews, attended no galas, and his photograph had not been published in over 2 decades. He was a man built for disappearance. His estate, known to locals only as the Aviary, was less a home and more a modern fortress surrounded by miles of dense private forest and monitored by state-of-the-art security. It was more myth than property. Getting inside seemed impossible. But Miles Corbin was a man who knew that every fortress has a crack. Using his old detective credentials, he partnered with a young, ambitious deputy from the Cascade County Station named Ava Rostova. Together, they found a pretext, a key to unlock the gate. Citing a recent series of minor earthquakes in the region, they claimed a need to perform a geological wellness check on all properties bordering the national park's unstable northern ridges. It was a flimsy excuse, a bureaucratic Trojan horse, but one that Croft's team of high-priced lawyers, after a week of tense negotiation, grudgingly accepted. The Aviary was less a house and more a private museum built of glass and steel. Glass walls 30 feet high looked out onto impossibly manicured gardens that abruptly gave way to the wild, untamed forest beyond. The interior was a stunning but sterile collection of the world's rarest artifacts. Tribal masks from the Amazon, pre-Columbian pottery, and, in a central climate-controlled gallery, a breathtaking collection of exotic insects, pinned and preserved in a silent, colorful death. Julian Croft himself was a surprise. He was not a hulking, obvious villain, but a man in his late 60s, impeccably dressed, with a disarmingly gentle voice and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. He was courteous, articulate, and seemed to find the detective's presence more amusing than threatening. He moved through his sterile palace with a practiced, predatory grace. As he led them on a carefully curated tour, Corbin's old instincts kicked in. He noticed a recurring design element. It was subtle, almost subliminal. It was etched into the glass panels separating the rooms, embossed on the spines of leather-bound books in his library, even woven into the intricate pattern of a Persian rug. It was the unmistakable shape of the Queen Alexandra's bird wing. The butterfly wasn't just another piece in his collection. It was his personal crest, the symbol of his entire domain. The obsession was everywhere. Corbin realized he was standing in the home of a man who didn't just collect rare things, he conquered them. And now Corbin had to wonder, was Elias Thorne just another specimen in his collection? The visit to the aviary yielded no direct evidence, but it did something more important. It hardened Corbin's suspicion into a near certainty. Every answer was like a knife made of fog. You could feel the edge, but not see it. The connection between Croft, the butterfly, and the place Elias Thorne vanished was too strong, too specific, to be a coincidence. Corbin and Rostova spent the next week buried in the musty, forgotten archives of the Whispering Giants National Park headquarters, digging through boxes of old ranger logs, maintenance reports, and administrative memos from the early 1990s. They were looking for a ghost, and on the fifth day, they found him. It wasn't a confession or a smoking gun, but something quieter, and in its own way, more damning. It was a series of 5 short, formal incident reports filed by Ranger Elias Thorne in the 3 months before his disappearance. In the reports, his careful, measured handwriting documented strange and unauthorized activity along the park's remote northern boundary, the same boundary that abutted Julian Croft's property. He reported hearing the low, grinding sound of what he believed was heavy drilling equipment late at night, a sound that didn't belong in the sanctuary of the park. He found survey markers made of non-park issue materials planted deep inside the park's protected territory. He even photographed strange, temporary structures that were erected and then gone the next day, like mechanical ghosts. Each report was concise, professional, and filled with the quiet, growing urgency of a man who knew he was seeing something he was not supposed to see. Corbin found the official response stapled to the back of the very last report. It was a handwritten note from the park's superintendent at the time, a man named Robert Galloway. The note was casually, brutally dismissive. Elias, it read, appreciate the diligence, but Mr. Croft is a friend to this park. His teams have our full permission for geological surveys. Please stand down on this. It's above your pay grade. The final sickening piece clicked into place when Corbin, using his old contacts in financial crimes, cross-referenced park donation records from 1992. He found a massive, anonymous donation of $3 million that had saved the park from a budget crisis. It had been made through a shell corporation, a corporation Corbin was able to trace back with absolute certainty to Julian Croft. Elias Thorne hadn't gotten lost in the woods. He hadn't been the victim of a random, tragic accident. He had been a good ranger, a man of integrity who saw something wrong and refused to look away. He saw a crime being committed against the place he was sworn to protect. And when he was told to stand down, he refused. He kept pushing. He kept reporting until someone made him stop. The old ranger reports, combined with the new explosive context of the butterfly pin, were enough. A paper trail of ignored warnings and corrupt money was no longer a theory. It was probable cause. Corbin and Rostova convinced a skeptical but intrigued judge to grant them a search warrant. Not for the glass house, not for the Museum of Dead Things, but for something far more specific. A 10-acre parcel of Julian Croft's land that Elias Thorne had mentioned by coordinate in his final chilling report. It was a rugged, inhospitable piece of land that, according to old maps, seemed to intentionally straddle the official, invisible boundary of the national park. The search team brought in a specialized crew with ground-penetrating radar, a technology that allows you to see the ghosts hiding beneath the earth. For a full day, they methodically scanned the rocky, tree-choked terrain, their screens showing nothing but the dense, predictable patterns of granite and soil. As the light began to fail and the forest grew heavy with shadows, one of the technicians called out, his voice sharp with discovery. He had an anomaly. It was small, perfectly rectangular, and about 12 feet down, near the base of a massive moss-covered rock outcropping. It looked, he said, like a void, a place where the earth was hollow. An excavator was brought in the next morning. The work was slow, painstaking. The machine's heavy bucket carefully scraped away layers of soil and rock that seemed to have been deliberately placed, compacted over years to look like undisturbed ground. After 4 hours of digging under the silent watch of the ancient trees, the bucket struck something that was not rock. It made a deep, metallic clang that echoed through the quiet woods. It was the edge of a steel hatch, rusted but solid. It had been welded shut from the outside. The team used cutting torches, the hiss and bright flame, a violent intrusion in the serene forest. As the last of the metal was sliced through, the hatch was pried open with a groan of protest. It revealed a steep iron ladder leading down into absolute, suffocating darkness. The air that rose from the opening was cold and stale, the smell of damp earth and 30 years of unbroken silence. Elias Thorne had stumbled upon Julian Croft's secret, a secret buried deep in the earth, a secret worth killing to protect. A forensic team descended the iron ladder into the hidden bunker. The space was small, no more than 10 feet by 10 feet, a cramped subterranean chamber carved from the cold, unforgiving rock. Dust motes, undisturbed for 30 decades, danced in the harsh beams of their flashlights like tiny ghosts. The scene inside was frozen in time, a perfect, grim time capsule. In one corner sat sophisticated drilling equipment, silent and coated in a fine layer of dust. Core samples, cylindrical sections of rock, were laid out in neat rows on a makeshift table. Beside them, detailed geological maps were spread out, held down by stones. The maps confirmed what Elias Thorne had suspected all those years ago. They detailed a massive, untapped deposit of rare earth minerals lying directly beneath the protected, sacred heart of Whispering Giants National Park. Croft hadn't been a friend to the park. He had been prospecting it, planning to illegally mine its incalculable riches by tunneling from his adjacent property. This was never about surveys. It was about theft on a geological scale. And in the other corner of the bunker, they found what was left of Ranger Elias Thorne. His remains were discovered in a shallow, hastily dug grave in the earthen floor. Forensic analysis would later confirm what the scene brutally suggested. He had died from blunt force trauma to the head. Beside him, in the loose soil, they found his Ranger issue sidearm and his radio, which had been shattered into pieces. He had fought back. He had tried to call for help. He had not gone quietly. It was during that desperate final struggle in the dark 30 years ago that the beautiful butterfly pin must have been torn from his attacker's lapel. It must have fallen unnoticed to the floor of the bunker, only to be unwittingly carried out on the sole of a boot or the cuff of a pant leg, and dropped in the forest above. It was the one mistake, the single tiny flaw in an otherwise meticulously planned and executed crime. The single beautiful jewel, born of obsession and greed, that held the entire ugly truth of what happened that crisp autumn afternoon. The earth, after 30 long years of silence, had finally given back what it had taken. The arrest of Julian Croft sent shockwaves through the rarefied worlds of international finance and philanthropy. He was a monster hiding in plain sight, a celebrated conservationist who, in secret, plotted to gut the very wilderness he claimed to cherish. He was a man who had built an empire on a foundation of ruthless, insatiable greed. The former park superintendent, Robert Galloway, now a frail old man living in retirement, was also charged as an accessory. His complicity and silence bought and paid for 30 years prior with a check that cleared his debts and cost a good man his life. Justice had been served, but it had come late, carved from stone and sorrow. For Clara Thorne, the discovery was both a vindication and a profound, bottomless agony. The ghost that had haunted her for 3 decades, the presence that lived in the empty space beside her, finally had a story. Her father wasn't a victim of the wilderness. He was a hero who had died protecting it. He had not been lost. He had been silenced. The story the world had told her about her father was a lie. But the one she had held in her heart, the quiet, certain truth of his integrity, had been right all along. A proper funeral was held. Rangers from across the country came to pay their respects. And Ranger Elias Thorne was finally laid to rest. His name cleared, his unwavering integrity honored. The butterfly pin, that tiny, iridescent witness to a secret murder, was eventually returned to Clara. She held it in her palm, a thing of impossible beauty born from a story of immense darkness. It was a physical reminder that the truth does not always shout from the mountaintops. Sometimes it whispers from the forest floor. And sometimes the smallest, most fragile-looking things are the only ones strong enough to survive the years and tell their tale. Elias Thorne's story is a testament to the fact that no secret is truly safe. No truth can be buried forever, because the earth eventually gives back what it takes. His name, once a synonym for a tragic mystery, is now a symbol of quiet courage. And because of a curious intern, a relentless retired detective, and the strange journey of a butterfly pin, his name will never be forgotten. What other cold case files do you think hold a single overlooked clue that could change everything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice helps keep these stories alive. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows. The story of Elias Thorne is a powerful reminder that the fight for truth is never truly over, and that even the quietest voice can echo through the years. If you believe no name should stay forgotten, don't forget to subscribe to Deep End Stories and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. We appreciate you being part of this community. Until next time, stay vigilant and never stop asking questions.